Hello, and welcome to Lily's Show and Tell series. If you're not familiar with Lily, you haven't been to one of our series before. Lily stands for Lifelong Information Literacy, and we are a group of librarians, information professionals, media specialists, educators who work to promote lifelong information literacy, often through events like this or our free annual conference that will be coming later this summer. Before we begin with our presentations, I have a couple of housekeeping items. First, please keep your mic and camera off unless you are speaking. Second, you should be able to turn captions off and on from the button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you don't see that button, you can click on the More icon with the three dots, and it will be in that window. This session is being recorded, and the slides in the recording should be sent out in about a week or so. Then finally, my job is to keep track of all your questions in the chat. So feel free, as Jessica is talking, to put your questions in. I will save them. And then at the end, when we do the Q&A, I'll make sure that we answer all of them. Now to our speaker. Jessica Rardin is presenting First Year Seminar is Canceled, Now What? Navigating Information Literacy Instruction at Times of Curriculum Change. Jessica is the first-year engagement librarian at the University of Wyoming Libraries. She's been in this role since July 2021 and enjoys seeing first-year students in their favorite library spots. All right, Jessica, it's all you.
Great. Thank you so much, April. And thank you, Lily, for having me today. I'm excited to talk with you all about first-year seminar and all of the things going on. So I wanted to start by giving a shout out, not only to you all for being here and Lily for hosting this event, but to my department, the Research and Instruction Department at the University of Wyoming Libraries. This work with the curriculum and first-year students was often done as a collective effort. And I just want to give a special shout out because they really do support all of my most out there ideas, go along with them, and then they also support the changes, big and small, that have occurred since I started in the role, and especially since our first year seminar course was paused and then canceled. So here's my agenda of where this presentation is going from its broad purpose to what happened and what's next. There are 4 learning outcomes for my presentation, and I'm interested in learning from you all too today. So I have a few poll everywhere questions for us all to share what's going on at our institutions, with the hopes that we can all exchange some ideas around information literacy and times of curriculum change. So we'll talk a bit about the first year seminar course, their removal, some of the different ways that the University of Wyoming Libraries have tried to engage first year students, some of the approaches that we've used for developing outreach and instruction, as well as just giving some time and space to talk about the resilience and persistence needed to maintain information literacy instruction, maintain our focus and our enthusiasm for working with students and information literacy instruction, especially during these times of transition. A little bit about the University of Wyoming. So we're about 8,000 undergraduate students with about, I think, 3,000 or so graduate students. And each year we have around 1,400 new first-year students. We have a high number of transfer students as well. So students coming in maybe their junior, senior years or even earlier. And the majority of our students are from Wyoming. We are the only 4-year institution, state-sponsored institution. So it does make the University of Wyoming a little bit unique. And our retention rate for first-year students from fall 2023 to fall 2024 was 79%. So I think that's in line with a lot of averages, but of course, always want that number to be higher. And then a little bit about the UW Libraries, which includes our geology library, our learning resource center, which is our curriculum collection, the annex where all of the things that don't fit in our main library are located, and then co-library is our main building on campus. We have over 300,000 annual visits, and our virtual branch, or our website, as we like to think of it, gets the most traffic at over 1 million views a year. I always look at that number or our LibGuide statistics and think, how many of those are me or library folks going to our homepage to learn something new? So I think it does represent that the website is very popular, but I always joke that at least, 1,000 of those are me. And my department, research and instruction, fits into our education and research services division, and we do the majority of the information literacy instruction each year. So this takes us to my first question, which I think some folks have already started answering, so that's great. So does your institution have a first year seminar or similar course? You can scan the QR code. You can join the link in the chat or even text in your response. And since this is an institutional account, it does ask you to put your name. You do not have to do that. You can just click skip for now. Instead of including your name or registering, it's all anonymous. So looks like from our numbers changing slightly a bit, the majority of folks here today do have a first year seminar currently, and some are not sure, which often happens. It might not be labeled as a first year seminar. It could be just another part of the curriculum. So I don't see any more responses coming in, so we'll move then on. So thank you all for sharing. So the University Studies program is what we here at the University of Wyoming call our current iteration of our general education curriculum. And the first year seminar was one required course in the overall number of credits that students needed to take for their general education requirements. It was a 3-credit course, and all first year seminar classes had to meet these 6 critical and creative thinking learning outcomes. So all of that, those 6 outcomes really led us to being an information literacy heavy course. And as might be the case at your institutions, our first year seminars included things like paleontology's great debates, Viking economics, travel writing, and then some intro level courses for programs like engineering and kinesiology. Each year there were about 80 sections, and there were about 20 to 25 students in these courses. So they were made to be a little bit smaller, just so students had more opportunities to interact with each other and their instructors. But in times of higher enrollment, fewer sections, some classes reached maybe around 30 students. And so one of the big things, of course, with this webinar is what happened, why was it paused, why was it cut? So there were a variety of reasons that the first year seminar was cut, and those included staffing and departmental loads, because it was set up so that colleges that had more first year students had to teach more sections than others, or the College of Arts and Sciences had a lot of students, but they also didn't have a lot of capacity for a ton of first year seminar courses with their number of faculty and the courses that they're already teaching. So there wasn't a real sort of like equal distribution, equitable distribution of these classes. And some folks taught the course on overload, and some were paid even differently by one department than another. So the FYS was also supposed to be taught by senior faculties, because we know that those faculty members often have a lot of experience mentoring and teaching students, but they're also the people tapped to do a lot of other things. So that didn't always happen, that a senior faculty was teaching the FYS, but it did happen in many cases. And after the pause was announced and then the cancellation, our provost did say that programs or individuals who really enjoyed teaching their FYS class could continue to do so. But it was no longer a requirement for it to be this specific first year seminar class. But instead, students could take any general education course to satisfy that 3-credit FYS starting in fall 2023. So how are the UW libraries involved in the course? So we taught many of the sections each semester, but not all instructors brought a librarian into their class. I would meet with the instructors at their colloquia, with the plural. So I met with them the spring before they would teach in the fall, and then at the beginning of the semester as well, to share any updates or information on how instructors could work with the library and include information literacy in their courses. We had a specific first year seminar instruction request form that had those 6 learning outcomes on the last slide, so that when instructors were scheduling their information literacy session, they could use that same course language to request their session. With the idea that if we're using their outcomes to connect with them, it may be easier for them to see where the library can really impact their students and for us to understand what they were looking for. And so once that request came through, then we had a kind of crosswalk of the FYS outcomes to our department's information literacy outcomes and to the ACRL framework. And then each of those outcomes had a series of mini activities that corresponded to each of those outcomes. So librarians could mix and match based on the course needs, and those mini activities could be tailored to the course, to that specific program or the student needs. But the idea was we had kind of a repository of ways to meet these outcomes for our library instructors. We also used the Credo information literacy modules. We still do here at the University of Wyoming. So we had a specific first year seminar set of modules that were created with the idea, again, of meeting those 6 different course outcomes with these different module contents. And so some instructors chose to incorporate that asynchronous content into their classes, and those were all available through Canvas Commons for download into the course. If you do a lot of things with Canvas Commons, you may know that it's sometimes really difficult to actually share a link to any of the information. At least on my end, I can never quite get the links from Canvas Commons to work correctly. So it usually meant that we did a lot of troubleshooting with instructors on how to get those actually added to their course, because there was always a bit of confusion about how to do so. And then we also have a personal librarian program. And while the FYS was running, we emailed all students enrolled in the FYS course each semester, since there were still some in the spring, but a smaller number. And we knew that they had a sort of researchy project and that students may need support just because the nature of the course. So with the personal librarian plan or program, I did get a few consults and a good number of questions via email. When I say a good number, these are still first year students. So I would say no more than maybe 10 emails and consults total a semester. But still, students, because they had that connection and our emails were coming at point of need, we often did get, I have this assignment coming up. Can you help me find some resources or give me some kind of guidance on where to begin with this project? So that was a really helpful touch point for students. Even if their classes didn't come in, we were still contacting them via email. So without the FYS, I've tried to create a web of support for first year students academically and through co-curricular opportunities. So the library is involved in all of these different activities and a few more. But once I created this graphic, it really wouldn't let me add anything else to it. So it's kind of stuck at this point. But we do outreach to 1,000 level course instructors to just share more information about what we as the library can do to support their classes and their students. We have those Credo information literacy modules that can fit all sorts of needs depending on what the instructor is interested in having their students do. COM 1 classes are kind of our 100 level of communication courses. And so we have both the first year writing program or English 1010, and then our honors college has honors colloquium as a COM 1 requirement, and we work with students in both of those classes. There's also a connection with COM 2s as part of the general education requirements, where we work with the spring semester of honors colloquium and English 2015, which is a course for students admitted with support. So that's another opportunity to work with students at a slightly higher level of those communication outcomes. We also do things like first gen student mentoring, and we have wellness events in addition to our workshops, the first year experience course, which is an optional 1 credit course, Saddle Up, which is our orientation programming, and then through Residence Life, we're doing a silent disco on Friday, actually, here in the library that they're sponsoring. And we also have done outreach to students involved in the living and learning communities through our personal librarian program, trying to connect with those students too. So it's not as simple as it used to be with the FYS course, but we still have some ways that we really try to target first year students. So this takes us to our second question. So what are some of the ways that your libraries reach first year students? So again, my goal with this webinar is to give an opportunity to share ideas as well, whether you're facing challenges related to your first year seminar or just are looking for some new ways to meet first year students. So please take a moment and share some of your own favorite touch points for instruction and outreach. And it should be the same link again as before. Okay, there we go. I was like, where are the responses? I had to switch the slide. So an FYS course, a summer program, info tables, English 101, intro to college course, a community fair. Awesome. Oops, I scrolled too much. Let's see. Tabling, English composition, as well as first year seminar, welcome week programming, pre-first week programming. Awesome. Presenting in English classes, information tables. Yeah, great. Summer orientation. Introductory courses for majors. Of course, those are great opportunities to engage with students. Oh, an amazing race. Yeah, we do an amazing race program too. An end of year poster session for first year students. Awesome. Library tours. Great. Sorry, when I scroll, it wants to change the slide. All right. Awesome. So I think we've slowed down on our responses. So thank you all for sharing. Hopefully there were some things on here that maybe you have questions about for our fellow participants, or you got a new idea. Okay. So I wanted to share some of the areas that we've tried that need some re-examining. I didn't want to say that these were not things that were successful, because some of them just need some tweaking and rethinking. So these programs have given the libraries opportunities for instruction and engagement, and we know that it takes additional time to find ways to connect with first year students and first year specific courses. Just through the fact that the FYS was a big touch point for our information literacy instruction, and now we're without it. So we're still, of course, trying to figure out how do we find the first year students, where and why and how can we reach students when they're just entering the university. They probably have a lot of library questions, resource questions. We know that library anxiety is real. And so how do we find different ways of connecting with students? So the personal librarian program, as I mentioned, started with first-year students, and it's worked with a few different groups with varying degrees of success. So we did the living and learning community outreach because those have faculty and staff sponsors and RAs to kind of help students connect with the library and see like, oh, these people that are emailing me can help. So we were hoping that that would be a good connection, but it didn't quite go as planned. And so now we're focusing on, for the personal librarian program this year, students who were enrolled in our STEP 1000 course, which were courses for students admitted with support to the university. They used to be FYS courses, but with the FYS pause, the courses changed into being a humanities credit. So they have some of the same learning outcomes focused on research, but they also have different learning outcomes just because of the nature of the course, but they should have some kind of researchy assignment. So we do try to connect with them to offer research support and just give more information about how the library can be a partner. We also tried some extra credit workshops. And so this was something that we really tried to pitch through our 1000 level course outreach as a way for instructors who maybe couldn't have their courses come to the library because, you know, of all of the other things that they're doing, or maybe the size of the course, they weren't sure if we could actually like accommodate their classes. So the idea was to offer 3 to 4 different optional workshops through the SOAR platform, which is a platform that the university uses for students to create kind of a co-curricular resume of experiences. So we listed all of the workshops in the SOAR platform, and then instructors could embed these SOAR activities into their courses. So if a student attended, it would automatically go to their gradebook, and students could earn extra credit that way. Students don't always love the SOAR platform, so we didn't find a whole lot of success going through SOAR, but we ended up finding a different audience through our workshops, which was graduate students. So we've offered more workshops focused on graduate students, and still are trying to figure out ways to connect with our first year students. And I want to give a shout out to the Texas Christian University folks who I saw present at Texas Libraries Association's annual conference a few years ago, who had a really successful extra credit workshop program that we worked to make our own. As I mentioned, the extra credit workshops helped with some of the 1000 course outreach. We looked at the learning outcomes of the 1000 level courses to try to find ways to connect what the library does to their own learning outcomes. And then we had our liaisons for these different departments reach out to the 1000 level course instructors to say, we have these extra credit workshops, you can bring your class in. We have asynchronous information literacy modules if you're interested in using those. We didn't find a lot of success there, but I think it's an area that we can continue to put some time and focus into finding. I saw some of you had some ways that you've done that, so interested to hear what's worked for you all. And then we also had a really successful opportunity to work with Political Science 1000, where we scaffolded information literacy into an assignment where students were creating political science definitions. So they were learning about evaluating sources, how to find information, and then create that into a definition, with our hope of creating an open source political science dictionary. But unfortunately, the instructor left, and we've had some trouble getting some new traction on that assignment with the new folks. As I mentioned too, we tried doing the personal librarian program outreach with the living and learning communities, which are in the dorms, students grouped around a similar interest. And this is something I think we can do a better job at, connecting with the sponsors of the living and learning communities and the RAs. So really targeting them as a first step, because they need to do programming, both the RAs and the sponsors. in order to meet the requirements of sponsoring those communities. So I think putting some information into their hands about the ways that the library can be a partner, can host different activities, would be a good way of connecting, especially as some of the living and learning communities are disciplinary focused on things, like health sciences, veterinary sciences, construction management. So a lot of different groups in this living and learning community. We also have tried doing a Padlet mini tour that was sort of a self-guided exploration of the website and the building as a way of being able to offer tours in a different way that felt meaningful for the students to kind of do the discovery themselves. But each of those mini tours needs to have a new Padlet created each time. So it does take some legwork and engagement, but I think it's again about pitching to the right people this opportunity for their students, especially at the beginning of the semester, to have a more guided way to explore the library on their own. We also created some mini information literacy tutorials through our Credo platform, and we've started creating micro learning tutorials too. So the goal with those is to really help bridge some of that gap between what we can do in a class and what students may still need to know or want to know and not know how to ask. So that's a goal to continue really getting those in front of the people who can use them and think that they would be helpful for their courses. And I think a lot of libraries are moving to a train the trainer model. We're doing a lot of professional development of the instructors, teaching the courses around information literacy can have a good result. We've been successful in doing this with our English 1010 instructors, and so that puts a little bit of less pressure on us as the librarians to cover everything in our one-shot session with the course. So now we actually have 2 lessons that are taught by the instructors of English 1010. So we can make sure that they know how to teach finding images in library databases, finding sources, and then evaluating sources to understand how they can fit your research need. So that's been successful with English 1010. So I think too, as we find new courses to work with, that we can continue to use Train the Trainer as a great way of taking some of that pressure off of us to do all of the instruction, but giving some really structured assistance to our already people teaching it. So these then were some of the things that I feel like have been successful that we've done for first year students and really creating that web of support without the first year seminar. So we're the University of Wyoming Cowboys. So Saddle Up is our orientation program, and we have an opportunity during Saddle Up called Create and Explore, where students are really just introduced to being in the library in some of our different spaces. We do information literacy bingo, where we use words about the library as bingo cards. So students are kind of passively learning about the library through bingo. We do trivia, we have crafts. So we've tried a couple different ways of just showing that the library is a place for students, whether that's exploring our collection or playing video games in a Super Smash Bros. Tournament. We also have a first gen student support resource fair that the library is included in, and then a general overall resource fair where we talk about things like jobs on campus in the library, but also giving students more information about the creation spaces that we have in our building. So we have, as I mentioned, English 1010 as a COM 1 and then our other courses as COM 2s, really leaning into those courses because they have information literacy learning outcomes. So finding ways to really increase our reach in those. The Honors Colloquium added some more research-focused assignments to their classes when the FYS was canceled, so we have more opportunity to do work with them there. And we have library coaches or peer mentors that also help with these in-person sessions, but then they also are at all of the workshops that we offer for students. They create tutorials and they can meet with students individually as that peer-to-peer support that we know sometimes students feel more comfortable asking a peer a question than us as librarians. We also work with the first year experience course, step 1102, and do a library amazing race. This used to be called Supermarket Sweep. I actually presented on it at a Lilly annual conference a few years ago, but we've rebranded it and made it an opportunity for students taking that course to come and explore the library through some mini games. I also teach a optional session that instructors can use in their class on TikTok and academic honesty. We're able to do some disciplinary specific resources depending on the focus of the first year experience class. So there's usually one on pre-nursing psychology. So we're able to go and share discipline specific resources around the theme of the class to, again, find ways of embedding library into their lives. And then we have an activity with the special collections where students look at yearbooks and old newspapers from the university. And then we have them kind of think through what is the same, what is different about their experience these days. And our step 1000, which again, as I mentioned, was an FYS course, is now the humanities general education course. We still do a lot of instruction with those students too. It just looks a little bit different because of the focus of the course. So I've also taught sections of step 1000 that have been focused on things like AI, internet privacy, algorithms, those things as a different way of connecting with those students. And we do a lot of engagement through programming. So we have end of the semester wellness events, wellness workshops, and we use the personal librarian program emails to plug those activities. And our campus learns about things through posters. So we have posters that go around campus into all of the dorms and into the union to also share ways to de-stress as the semester is ending. Okay, so what's coming next? So after the FYS pause, there was an opportunity to reimagine the general education curriculum. And the first iteration of brainstorming included the library on groups tasked with first year programming, that was me, digital literacy, and our overall communication sequence. And so that work began in spring 2020, or in, I think, fall 2023. And then in spring 2024, we created smaller working groups who were tasked with the learning outcomes, policies, recommendations, budgetary considerations for anything that was going into our new general education curriculum. So I was on the first year foundation course committee, and our goal was to create a course with a focus on transition to college skills, information literacy skills, but without a specific research component. And the courses also needed to be adisciplinary. So anybody could be in any course, and it was going to be really structured around what was taught so that all students were receiving the same information in the same way. Unfortunately, that class wasn't included in the next recommendation for the new curriculum. But our faculty does seem to be supportive of still having a first year experience course. So there is some hope there. And we also have the new digital literacy component and the communication sequence of COM 1, 2, and 3 still do have information literacy outcomes. So we know we'll still have ways to engage with first year students, including the optional first year experience course and the required Saddle Up 1 credit week-long orientation programming. Oops. So I also wanted to just reflect a bit on what it's been like as the first year engagement librarian transitioning out of this really specific first year seminar course that we were working with. So we still try to find different ways to work with first year students, including I teach a first year experience course, and I sponsor a living and learning community each semester to try to keep that touch point up. But it has been tough because first year instruction really became something that we needed to do a lot more outreach on, and it was something to seek out instead of counting on. So these are some pictures of our wellness events, our snack carts, and this is the middle photo. This AI whiteboard was during our English 1010 information literacy session. We really found other ways to build more information literacy into that course, which has been really helpful, and really making sure that information literacy matters to campus, and finding ways of just establishing that we can be really great partners. And while we haven't really confirmed what our final version of the USPs, our general education courses, will be, we still have those opportunities to work with students, including during Saddle Up. But we also know during orientation week, it's very overwhelming as you're learning to be a college student. So you can't always fit everything into your brain when you're learning it all. So finding, again, new ways of working with students has been challenging, but also been fun in finding new partners. So with our university's online course redesign program, we've also found ways to embed resources, activities, and tutorials into courses that haven't always been connected to a librarian through this course redesign process. We take a lot of time to reflect on what's working, what's taking time that we don't always have. What are we hearing or seeing from students in the instruction sessions that we have or at our reference points, whether that's our help desk or our online chat. And then something I found works a bit is to use research consults to find additional courses that may need some information literacy instruction, because if a student's coming for a consult, they may have some questions. So that's another then opportunity for outreach to that instructor. And then, of course, finding different allies on campus, like Centers for Teaching and Learning, large course coordinators or program coordinators, because they will give you the opportunity to embed into a lot of courses without having to talk to 30 different instructors. But if the program coordinator can be on board, then maybe you have that reach in a new way. So this takes us to our last question. So again, thinking about sharing our strategies for when you at your institution have faced a difficult culture or cultural moment, what things have been successful or helpful for you? I know that this is a bigger question as well. Communicating in the language of faculty, great. Talking, attending departmental meetings. Run away. I mean, sometimes it definitely feels like that is the best option in the moment. Listening to others' needs and explaining how we can meet them. Great. Yeah, those faculty in our corner and getting some advice from them. Networking with faculty. Great. Assessing success, keeping and sharing statistics, right? Sometimes that's a great way of giving information to instructors or programs, saying this is what's going on. Yeah, do good things and it catches on. Start small, right? We can't do it all the time. Okay. So speaking of time, feel free to keep on answering this, and I can send out the responses if that would be helpful for folks. I think there's some great ideas here, but for the sake of time, I'm going to change the slide. So these were just some of the references that I used in terms of some of those university statistics and information about the program. And thank you all for your time, for participating in these poll questions. And here's my email address, so please feel free to connect if you have questions, ideas. I'm always happy to share and connect with other folks especially during these times where we just need to find our allies.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, so got some hand clapping going on in the chat. Got some questions. Um, this one is kind of goes back to the beginning, but what were the mini activities for the old FYS program? Were they enacted by the instructor, the librarian, and were they asynchronous?
Yeah, so the mini activities were usually, they were just things like creating keywords and thinking about keywords from multi perspectives. There were things about, if different authority in sources, things about access to information, so thinking about information privilege. So these were things that then, depending on what learning outcomes the instructors selected for the FYS courses, we could, share a few different activities in one session. And they were in-person activities. We did have a few courses for the FYS that were synchronous online, but I don't think we had any asynchronous first year seminar courses, at least that I know of that we worked with. So they were mostly things that we did synchronously, both online and in person. Hopefully that answered the question.
Hopefully, if not, please put it in the chat if you want clarification. So it seems like you're kind of doing a lot, spreading it out more. So how many librarians do you have doing outreach? And is it just public services and are staff participating?
Good question. So our research and instruction department, all of the different things that I've talked about are all done by our department. A lot of them done by me. We have right now, we're in a period of transition, I would say. So we have 5 to 6-ish librarians at any given time that are working with students and first year students in different ways. But so for English 1010, for example, all of our librarians teach the different sections. So it could be anywhere from like 5 to 7 a semester. We do have some staff folks that can help with outreach and will help with doing some of our social media or working with our students. But overall, the faculty librarians do most of the teaching and outreach. We do have a marketing person for some things.
Oh, I am so jealous of that. I want one. We got really excited about your TikTok and academic honesty. Can you
Yeah,
expand on that instruction and can you share it with us?
yeah. So fun fact, it's a book chapter. So it's available in the University of Wyoming's digital repository. It was in the Unframing the Visual, I think is the title of the book that came out, I think last January. So all of the lesson plan, the framing, all of that is in that book chapter. I'm happy to also share additional resources on it too. But this was a lesson plan where I work with the students in the FYE class and we talk about how social media works for sharing. Things also thinking about appropriation, thinking about giving credit to the creators. So my example is becoming slightly more outdated, but we use the example of Addison Rae, who went on the Jimmy Fallon show and showcased a bunch of TikTok dances that she didn't create. There was no information given about who created the dances, and there was a huge backlash online. So there are a bunch of articles then that were kind of created at that point where we talk about how can you copyright a dance move? What does it mean to give credit? Why was this kind of an issue that credit wasn't being given? And then we talk about the Jimmy Fallon show's response to then having those creators come on and showcase their dances. And we connect that to scholarly conversations and how they, as students, can really be thinking about who they're citing, what they're citing, making sure that they're giving proper credit. So thinking about it from more of that lens instead of a conversation like don't do this, but more of them giving us the reasons why they shouldn't do it or why they see it's problematic. And then I have them create a scholarly infographic so they can find any article that they want. It's usually on a wellness topic because that's one of the course outcomes. And so then they have to find an article, figure out how they want to share the information from that article in a tweet thread, in a Instagram post, Facebook post, TikTok, whatever it is. And then how are they giving proper credit and making sure that they're citing their sources. So it then kind of leads into a mini assignment, or at least an in-class activity where we can co-create that together. So they learn how to search and cite and about scholarly conversation in one session. Oh, and thank you for finding the paper.
Yes, thank you. All right. Is the personal librarian program intended to help students associate the library with this? Help students associate the library with a specific individual librarian that they can tag. In other words, like, this is your library, you report to this librarian.
Yeah, good question. I think overall, our goal is that students just know that the library exists, that we are here to help, whether it is that specific person or not. Oftentimes, if somebody does respond to a personal librarian program, email that's outside of maybe the discipline or area of focus of the librarian that they're emailing, we can refer that to whoever it needs to get referred to. But our real goal is just to put a human face on librarians, that we have different areas of expertise, that we can answer whatever questions are coming up in a really non-judgmental way, because we have no bearing on their overall grades. We won't talk with their students or their instructors about whatever questions they're asking. So I would say, while it is connecting with one specific person, our real goal is just showing what opportunities the library has for workshops and programming, and that we can answer questions.
With this more scattered approach to first-year outreach, what do you do to avoid duplicating the same outreach to students? Does this impact the scaffolding instruction efforts on campus?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Especially when we had the first year seminar and the English 1010 courses, where students were often taking those at the same time. We made a real concerted effort to make sure that the learning outcomes, the activities in those classes were very different, because a student could have information literacy instruction for their FYS and then a week later come for 1010. And we didn't want them to think, oh, I don't need to go because I already had that. So we worked hard on really separating those learning outcomes. And so without the FYS, of course, we still have English 1010. We've crammed a lot more, thankfully, opportunities. And by crammed, I mean nicely scaffolded information literacy into the course. And so that has been helpful. The first year experience courses that I work with, because those are so different than the FYS or English 1010, they're usually more resource focused or getting to know the library focused. We don't really talk about academic honesty in other classes besides that, the FYE that I know of. That's the only class that we've ever done that activity in. And so I think really what it comes down to is, now when we're thinking about, our 2000 level intro to research class, often in that discipline, thinking about, again, assuming maybe incorrectly sometimes that students did have an English 1010 or an honors colloquium course where they got that kind of, here is some information about keywords and searching. And then by the time they're in research methods, we try to get more specific into that discipline to avoid some of those, again, overlaps. And I would say it works okay often. We do still have students that end up in library sessions a couple times a semester, and the mini activities for the FYS sometimes do get used still without the FYS to just introduce things in different ways, and to be able to share about what the library does in different ways, like thinking about information privilege and access, when we have those opportunities to bring that up in a different class.
All right, we're nearing the end.
Yeah.
This is one of my questions. On my institution, we sometimes have trouble getting faculty buy-in at the 1000 level, because it seems like everyone wants to be inside the 1000 level. So every survey, every new initiative, they want freshmen to answer it. And sometimes they're like, we can't add another thing to our course. So how do you get that buy-in?
Yeah, I wish I had a great answer for you. I think we're still working on it. Definitely having good partners on campus is useful because maybe they want the writing center to come in and talk to their students about something, or the tutoring center. So we have like a slide in the writing center's presentation that talks about our library coaches, our peer mentor program. So even when the writing center is talking to a 1000 level course, they're getting like a little bit of library through that presentation. So that's kind of my method or message, is to really figure out where can we do some embedding, some piggybacking. So we're not, having a million presentations for students of each individual resource, because I do think that can get really tiring for the students themselves. They're like, I've already gotten this, or I don't need this. Why is this person talking to me? So the more that we can kind of work together with the other groups that want to get into these classes and maybe try to find a more streamlined approach, I think all the better for doing that.
I do something similar. I actually co-present quite a bit with the Writing Center. We
Yeah.
team. All right, this is my last question. So if anyone else has something, put it in the chat now, please. Or if you want to raise your hand, we could call on you. So do you offer food or giveaways at your workshops?
We've sometimes had candy that more of like a happenstance thing than anything specific. We've done an event in the past that we called Coffee, Tea, and Accessible Zines for our Access UW Day. And so that was something where we did have coffee and donuts and tea. So students would walk by it and be like, oh, there's donuts. How can I engage or participate? We also have tried offering snacks at our workshops that we offer for our English 1010 students. And we also tried offering prizes. But really what we learned is that it's not necessarily the food in that case that was grabbing the students. It was that they could get extra credit for attending the workshop. They could make up an absence for attending the workshop. So that had a bigger draw than the food necessarily did.
All right. I don't have any more questions, and I don't see any more questions in the chat. So thank you, Jessica.
Yeah.
This was great. I took lots of notes.
Great. Well, thank you again so much for participating. Oh, sorry, I thought I heard something. So thank you all for your time. Please feel free to reach out. I'll put my email in the chat as well if there's anything that I can provide extra, but thank you for your time and this opportunity. Have a great day.
And probably by the end of next week, we will have the recording and then the slides sent out to everyone. So thank you for hanging out with us.
Great. Thank